Let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your earliest involvement with Fellowship Memphis and how it all got started.
Yeah, so in 2003, in January, John Bryson and Ben Parkinson, who would end up becoming co-founders with me, they came to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was serving at the time, at the Big Pink Church. I don't know if you're familiar with it, in the shape of a crown, no less, but that's more information that you wanted. Anyways, there was this vision to start a multi-ethnic church, gospel-centered, disciple-making multi-ethnic church. And when they were, these are two white guys, when they were asking around for an African-American guy to partner with, my name just kept coming up. So they came, cast the vision to me in January. In May, we sold our house, and Memorial Day weekend, we landed in Memphis, Tennessee with about 26 other people to start this work.
And you were the lead pastor at the time?
No. So that first year, so I don't know how familiar you are with the Fellowship Bible Church movement. We were kind of birthed out of Fellowship Little Rock. That is heavy plurality of leaders, and their vocational plurality is kind of known as the management team. And so the three of us, me, Ben Parkinson, and John Bryson, we made up the management team. A year into it, they came to me and said, look, we're just having a hard time gaining traction in the African-American community. We were growing, but it was not the kind of diversity we were looking to get. And so in 2004, no lobbying on my part, they just felt led of the Spirit to say, Bryan, we want you to lead us. So I became the lead pastor in 2004.
Tell me about Rick Trotter's involvement with the church. How did he come to be a part of the church, and how did he come to be the worship director?
So yeah, we said from jump, again, what was driving our church was this multi-ethnic vision. And we said there were three big buckets to make that happen: location, leadership, and music. Music, as you know, Seth, is huge in building the culture. And the music piece was missing for us. And Rick, who at the time he was married to my sister, gifted worship leader down in Atlanta, and he had come up and had filled in on some Sundays for us, and we felt called of God to extend him the opportunity to come. I'm not sure the exact dates, somewhere around 05, 06, somewhere in there. So
Okay. What was your relationship with him like prior to 2010? Were y'all close?
I wouldn't say we were close. We for sure weren't at each other's throats at all. We had a cordial, very, very cordial relationship with each other. Typical Thanksgiving dinners and plenty of Sundays over our house. We would go hang out with them, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. So in 2010, it was discovered that Rick had placed a hidden camera in a church bathroom. Describe the first 24 hours from when you found out about that.
Seth, that was the most painful day of my life. And it would prove to be the most painful day for our church. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm in my office, which is a floor up. I think it's the third floor. Main office is on the second floor. Anyways, I'm on the floor up. I get a call from a young lady who was an intern with us, and she said, Pastor Bryan, I need to talk to you. I said, come on up. She walks in, and immediately looking at her body language, I knew something was really wrong. She's shaking at the point of tears. She's got this phone in her hand. She sits down, and Seth, the first words out of her mouth was, I was sitting on the toilet. And I said, let me stop you. I don't know where this is going. I want someone else in the room with me. So I called Ricky Jenkins, and he had already left for the day, had just left. He was in the car, and I said, Ricky, I need you to make a U-turn and come on back. And Ricky came on back, and he's in the room with us. And within the span of 3 hours, Seth, I get sucker punched 3 times. What winded me the first was I said, what's going on? She says, I'm sitting on the toilet, and we've got a unisex bathroom in our office. And, it's a small office, so there's a lot of people going in and out. And said I was using the bathroom and there was a bookshelf, I can see it now, facing the toilet. And she said, I saw this phone recording me. I was devastated. Like, there's a sexual predator among us. Well, now that leads me to the next question, Seth. Whose phone is it? It's your brother-in-law's. I'm going from devastation to numb. So as the shepherd, I'm now thinking about our church and like all of this stuff, all the victims. But at the same time, and there's no levels of victimization here, my mind immediately goes to my sister. My assumption is they're going to get divorced. Like, how's that conversation going to happen? She's going to have to do a massive reset on her life. And so we have that conversation, and I comfort her. She leaves. Ricky's still in the office, and there's a pound on my door. It's my brother-in-law. I open the door. There's a wildness in his eyes. He's frantic. First words out of his mouth, of course, are, have you seen my phone? And I said, I've got your phone. And with Ricky Jenkins sitting right there, I says, you are officially done. Terminated on the spot. This was not a, let's put him on paid administrative leave. This wasn't a, let's pray about it. He's done. I then called the chairman of our elder board right away. He says, I need to alert you to something. And then I got to call my dad. So now the question, Seth, is what do I do with this phone? And here's what I got to own, Seth. What I should have done immediately was to call the cops. I didn't do that. My thought process was, this phone's got to, like, if I leave it here, I'm looking at the wildness in my brother-in-law's eyes. I don't want to leave it at the church and go home, because what if he breaks in, he's desperate, and now the phone's gone. So I take it home with me. Walk in the house, my wife says to me, now here's the third sucker punch. My wife says to me, how was your day? Oh, let me tell you about my day. Tell her about the phone. We pull the phone out. There's a, on iPhones, there's this camera roll. And it's block after block after block, unisex bathroom, Fellowship Memphis, but there's one block that's different. My wife says that's his guest bathroom at his house. We click on that block, and I watch my baby sister. So he's married. He was married to the sister next to me. Mm-hmm. I watch my baby sister. And again, there's no levels of victimization. What particularly struck me about that, Seth, was you put it in a unisex bathroom, whosoever will let him come, and you don't know. But that one he specifically targeted. I go from devastated to numb. Now I'm enraged. And I'm headed out the door. And my wife's like, where are you going? I know this isn't very pastoral. I'm going to knock this guy out. And my wife literally jumps on my back, restrains me. Next day, I bring the phone in. I give it to my executive pastor, Bill Garner. I give him these directives. Bill, this is the phone. I explained to him what happened. I need you, and we've got several staff members who verified this, to call Memphis Police Department, and I said, I want you to call Child Protective Services. Now, here's why I said that. My brother-in-law had praise team rehearsal at the office. And I knew during praise team rehearsals, a lot of times those on the praise team were bringing their kids. And I wanted to go overboard because now I'm in shepherding. Like, I'm always a shepherd, but I'm like, I got to take the extra. I don't want to leave anything to chance. And then, this is Friday, February 5th, I hand him the phone, and I never see it again.
What happened to the device?
On February 5th in the morning, when I walked into the office, and I gave Bill Garner the clear directive to call Memphis Police, Child Protective Services, I then handed him the phone, never saw it again.
Still to this day,
To
you
this
don't know
day.
what happened.
Don't know what happened.
In some of the information that's been put out there, it appears as if the church leaders, it's not very clear, went through a process of identifying the victims. I know you mentioned that, you identified some in the camera roll. Was there any more, quote, investigation on the church's behalf in identifying victims?
I can't speak to that. I don't know. I can tell you what I saw. Outside of that glance at the camera roll, that happened twice. One, when the person blew the whistle, they showed me the phone. And two, when I went home that evening, right? And then I told you, I clicked on that one that looked different. Mm-hmm. I come back to the church the next day, hand it to Bill Garner, never saw it again.
Obviously, you saw something that was deeply disturbing. Did you immediately understand that you were dealing with potentially criminal behavior?
Oh, I knew that right away. Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was predatory. It was predatory behavior. That's why there was no hesitation. There was no hesitation in me terminating him. There was no hesitation, the next day, that's why I walk in and say, we've got to get on the phone right away. That's why I told Bill Garner that.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that, praise team rehearsal, there could have been children around. There were at least 2 alleged victims that told a local newspaper in 2016 that they were minors at the time of that incident. Were you aware at that time that there could have been minors involved, or it was likely that there were minors involved?
I had no idea that there were for sure. Mm-hmm. The reason why I wanted Child Protective Services called was because I felt like there was a chance. Did that ever get confirmed by me? No. And see, that's the other thing. I was pulled out of this pretty quickly, to which I'm thankful for the elders for. But there were a lot of things, like when I read that article in 2016, I'm in California. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of things in that 2016 article that not only were new to me, Seth, but caused me a lot of great pain. And one of the things I have to own, I just have to own, is that I didn't push hard enough for written documentation as it relates to them contacting the authorities. Because the brief moment I was a part of it, I'm getting oral reports. And then I'm pulled out of the process, but forget all the bureaucracy and all the process stuff. I should have owned, I should have pushed. I need to see a physical written report. When I put too much trust in what a person was telling me. Now, again, there are people who are substantiating that he did reach out, but that's not enough. I should have gone the extra mile and says, I actually need to see something physical. And I can't outsource that to anybody else. That's on me, Seth.
So you said you were recused from the situation pretty quickly. Maybe you said this before, but say again, what was the timeline there? When were you sort of pulled out of the situation as a church leader?
Yeah, it's somewhere between a week to 2 weeks, somewhere in there. You'll forgive me if I don't. I mean, it's been 10 years. I don't know. I don't know all the timeline there. I do remember, of course, when something like this happens, Seth. There are several elders meetings that are called emergency meetings. I do remember sitting in several of those. And then in one of those, the elders, and I think it was a wise decision, they said, look, we want to avoid any appearance of evil, any appearance of impropriety here. And Bryan, we don't like the optics of it. This is your brother-in-law. This is your family. even though it goes without saying, I wanted him under the jail. Do you know, to this day, my sister is working 3 jobs, and she's just one of the many victims out there. So I'm not elevating her. She's working 3 jobs and going to college. My nephew just Googled his dad and wrote a letter to him. This is like any, listen, the victims were part of that. They're living that much worse than me. But for my sisters, plural, this was a fault line in my family. I wanted him, it's hurtful to me for any narrative that would suggest that I would exchange the sheep of Fellowship Memphis and all of those precious victims and my own flesh and blood to protect an institution or an in-law. That's hurtful to me.
Some have accused you of covering things up. Did you cover anything up?
Didn't cover anything up. I think there's, and this gets back to what I just shared with you. Like, what's the motive there? Like if you just stop and just think this through, what is the motive? Like, yes, I'm a pastor, and yes, I was in shepherding mode, and yes, I want to do everything I can to protect the flock. But this is deeply personal to me too. And this whole, I think a part of that narrative comes from, and I'll speak to this, Seth, is the level of secrecy. And let me tell you where that comes from. And here's another thing I've got to own. One of our first elders meetings, and I'll never forget it, was we brought in legal counsel. And the big question is Sunday's coming. So this happens on Thursday, February 4th. And somewhere Friday or Saturday, you'll forgive me, I know there was a meeting between when it happened and Sunday. My question is, man, I got a great opportunity it's a heart-wrenching opportunity, but to pull the people into this, to shepherd them, okay? So legal counsel, I forget if they're on the phone or if they're there physically. Legal counsel is clear. You cannot say anything. You cannot say what this individual did. Now, here's what I've learned since then, and here's what I would do differently. I don't want to villainize lawyers. Lawyers exist to minimize liability, right? And in that moment, I'm not thinking that. I'm just, okay, the lawyer said I can't say anything. If I had to do it now, I would have risked being sued by my now ex-brother-in-law if it meant being vocal. I would have thrown caution to the wind. But this idea of secrecy, it wasn't us trying to hide anything, Seth. I can speak for myself. It was following the counsel of the lawyers.
What was the timeline of the church being informed? What was said and when was it said to the church?
So I know 2 things from the stage. One was that Sunday, but that was Rick Trotter's no longer with us. Okay. He then he goes to rehab for I don't know, 3 to 6 months. So this happens February 4th. You'll forgive timing. I want to say August, when he's out of rehab. Now again, we'd exercised church discipline. He is removed from our church. removed. August, he says, I want to confess what I've done. And we said, fine. And we had him write a statement that meshed with elder approval, in which he named what he did. I don't know exactly what was said, but for sure, he talked in some detail about what he did, and he did that before the church. And we did not restore him to vocational ministry. In fact, we made it clear he could never work there again. We did restore him to membership.
So you were recused from involvement in the situation as a church leader pretty early on. Were you still getting regular updates from the other church leaders about the situation?
I was not. That was a clear directive from the elders. It was a directive, and we are an elder-ruled church. You are completely removed from this, and you're to have no involvement in it.
How did Fellowship Memphis care for the victims?
So what we did, and I had two conversations. Actually, one of them was with my baby sister. So she was, I believe she was in Michigan at the time. So she's not under the Fellowship Memphis. But I had one conversation outside of the one where the individual, blew the whistle. And what we were tasked with was to say, we will support you in prosecution. In fact, the victim who was a part of our church staff that I spoke to is on record saying that not only did Pastor Bryan say, we will support you, but Pastor Bryan also said, this is her words, that if he were in my shoes, he would prosecute. See, Seth, what I want you to understand is I encourage prosecution. I encouraged it with my baby sister. I encouraged it with this other victim. My assumption was it's going to the media. That's my assumption. And I was more than fine with that. So any narrative that suggests that for somehow, some way, I don't want things to go to media, I assumed someone was going to prosecute. I assumed we were going to hit the papers. I assumed all of that.
So there were multiple alleged victims that told the Memphis Commercial Appeal in 2016 that one of your fellow church leaders, John Bryson, had discouraged them from going to the police. Do you believe that's true?
I can't speak to that. I don't know. I wasn't involved in those meetings. In fact, just a matter of full disclosure, as I've been fully disclosing all along, I remember reading that, and that was the first time I heard of that. First time I heard of that. Had never even heard those allegations.
The church received some criticism for financially supporting the Trotter family after Rick was fired. What do you say to that?
Great question, Seth. Here's the tension we were feeling. I was a part of that elders meeting. The tension we were feeling was, we have a sexual predator among us who has abused his position of power to prey on the sheep. We don't want to compensate that. We don't want to support that, period. But on the other hand, he's got a wife who did not have a full-time job, and he's got 2 kids. So in a 1 Timothy sense, we're looking at her as a widow. And the Bible is clear that we want to offer support to widows, just like we would offer support to all the victims, because this particular person, their livelihood was connected to his. What we did was, and I think, I'll give you this level of detail, I think my former brother-in-law was making $60K a year. I can say with pretty certain confidence that we said, we're going to give 6 months, $30K to support the wife and the 2 kids. And I'll be honest with you, Seth, if this were to happen again, I would wrestle with that same tension of how do you care for someone who played no part in this. But at the same time, just going, we don't want to support that. That's the tension we wrestled with, Seth.
Mm-hmm. So Rick went on to work at another Memphis church just 18 months after that incident, and you spoke to them before they hired him. What'd you say?
Me and Richard Reeves, their lead pastor, met at a payway on Union. I'll never forget it. And he brought up that he was interested in hiring Rick. He mentioned that. I fully disclosed everything to him. Here's what I have to own. If I had to do it all over again, I would have put a full court press on telling him not just here's what he did, which I told him everything. I would have grabbed him by the collars and I would have said, do not hire him. I feel culpable in what happened with these other people because I didn't go the extra mile. And if I had to do it all over again, Seth, I would have went the extra mile. And I got to own that.
Over the past 10 years, you haven't spoken publicly much at all about this situation. Why not?
I think the good thing, Seth, in all of this is that while a part of me, you felt this thing of, man, I just want to close the book. I just want to move on. I'm grateful for a group of people out there using the platform of the internet who have kept the victims and their voices front and center. I'm grateful for that. And that's really a lot of why we're sitting down now. Part of the reason why I didn't speak to it is all of the counsel I was getting was don't respond to that. Just don't respond to that at all. And I listened to their counsel. And unfortunately, because I listened to their counsel, I never got a chance to speak up and to say, here's why I took the steps that I did. And my heart behind everything was to fight for the victims. That's why I didn't respond.
So the Southern Baptist Convention has had a sort of reckoning over the last few years with sex abuse. And your new church home, the Summit Church, has led that charge in many ways. What do you think you bring to the table at this point for helping other churches protect against abuse and care for victims?
I've learned some hard lessons. And let me just recap the lessons I've learned. Should have pushed harder for written documentation. Not to demonize lawyers, but to understand lawyers play a specific role. And I've learned the hard way, I should have advocated publicly more for victims. And you haven't asked the question, so let me just put it out there. In 2015, I have a conference. It's called the Kainos Movement. And it's 5 years removed. My sister has since reconciled, which that's interesting. That caused a clear fault line in my family, which I could talk to you forever about that. He's hired at this other church. He's serving in ministry. These aren't excuses. My thought process is it's a 2-day event. I can put him on stage. That was a horrible, horrible decision that I've got to own. So I've learned some hard lessons over the years. My heart was always in the right place. I worked as hard as I could with what I never once did I discourage any victim, but there were some gaps that I've had to learn the hard way. My dad had a little proverb growing up. Experience isn't always the best teacher, but it is the only school a fool will attend. And through just some fumbles, again, my heart was in the right place. Those mistakes, which continue to follow me, I think have positioned me well to serve in a place called Summit. Yeah.
Anything else about the situation that you feel compelled to address?
I want to say sorry. Sorry to all the victims. And I want them to know that I fought hard. I did the best that I could at the time, but speaking for me, it wasn't good enough. At no point was I ever trying to cover for my brother-in-law. In some ways, Seth, I saw myself as a victim, not anywhere near the level. But I fought hard, and I did the best that I could. But I still know that I fell short, and I need their forgiveness.